For an aquarium, I'm going to say, sorry, honey, that is a data security risk, and we're not going to be able to allow that technology in our home. It'll be interesting to see if on our next session, the CEOs we're about to hear from have any thoughts about how they value the application within their own businesses. And what we have coming up next is a panel of cloud startup CEOs who are going to give us lessons learned from scaling their business. We have G-Man Yip, who's the CEO of BitTitan. We have Michelle Feaster, the CEO of Usermind. And we have Joe Duffy, the CEO of Pulumi. And moderating the panel, we have GeekWire co-founder John Cook, who will tell you a bit more about our panelists. John?
Thanks, Lucas. Thanks to SkyTap for sponsoring. We're excited to be here and jump into this panel. I want to make this as interactive as possible, too. So, yeah, G-Man, don't sit on Michelle, please.
Yeah.
And so if you have questions throughout the session, feel free to just jump up onto the mic at any time and flag us, and we'll take those questions, because we do want to make this an interactive session. To jump in, we started a new program at GeekWire earlier this spring called the Elevator Pitch. It is a new video series in which we put entrepreneurs into the Space Needle elevator and then have them tell us in the 42 seconds it takes to get to the top of the Space Needle what they do and how they do it. So I'm going to recreate that here briefly on stage and allow each of our panelists to do their own quick 42-second elevator pitch, and don't go over or else you lose a point. So we'll start with G-Man and move this way. G-Man Yip of the CEO of BitTitan.
Yeah, BitTitan basically is a cloud-based IT service delivery automation platform. And what our platform does is that it helps IT organizations through the adoption of technology. And when you think about that life cycle, it's around assessment, deployment, and management. And we help these organizations create a scalable and repeatable methodology so that your IT organization can grow at a quicker pace and keep up with your business challenges and needs.
You'd pass. That was a good pitch. Michelle, of Usermind.
Pleasure to meet you all. Usermind is a customer experience platform. We're focused on helping customer experience visionaries and enterprise customers optimize key aspects of their customer lifecycle, such as onboarding, cross-sell, upsell, renewal, and loyalty programs.
And Joe Duffy, the CEO of Pulumi, your 42-second elevator pitch. I think you were short, Michelle, by the way.
It's all good.
Is it better to be short or better?
It's better. It's better than go long.
I'm not closing a deal here, so I think it's
That's right.
Low stakes, brother. It's low stakes.
So Pulumi is essentially the easiest way to go from idea to code to cloud. What we find is, the cloud platforms today have incredible power and capabilities, but they're really difficult for developers to use. And once developers access that power of the cloud, it's really difficult for teams to manage the software in the cloud. So we basically give developers a way to write the code and get it into the cloud and manage it once it's there in a team environment.
Great. Well, as you can see, three very diverse companies, also kind of diverse in stage, too, which I really like as well. Pulumi just launched last week, wasn't it?
Last Monday, yeah.
Usermind, kind of mid-stage. BitTitan goes back a few years to, was it your garage, G-Man, or basement?
Basement in my 2007.
Basement. G-Man's got a great story because he really bootstrapped the business from the very early days. So I want to get into that debate on bootstrapping a business versus taking outside capital. But to jump in, I just wanted to ask each of you, because all of you came from kind of larger organizations before you made the startup leap. And I want to contrast what it was like working, G-Man and Joe, kind of for Microsoft, Opsware for you, Michelle, and Apptio, and what that transition was like and why you made that leap to the startup world and the lessons maybe you took from the big company or the ones you left behind. So why did you make that leap, and what does that look like for you? For anyone to jump in.
Yeah, so I was at Microsoft for 12 years. I did a variety of things, mostly in developer tools, unsurprisingly. So I ran, for example, the programming languages groups and the compiler groups. I worked in Microsoft Research for a while, building distributed operating systems. So I sort of worked in all aspects of the company, did a tour in Windows as well. I always sought out sort of the more entrepreneurial, innovative environments. And in a big company, you can find that pretty easily. I like to say Microsoft is basically a collection of 10,000 startups with infinite pockets to sort of fund interesting ideas. And the thing that I found, I got fairly high up in the company, but I still felt disconnected from the business itself. And so for me, doing a startup was a way to keep doing sort of innovative things. I saw a huge opportunity with the cloud. and it seemed like the perfect time. But you're more connected to, hey, is this idea actually going to draw revenue or not? You know, at a big company, you can do a bunch of ideas that fail, and there's sort of lost leaders and interesting economic situations in a big company that may not be apparent. And I wanted to get more directly connected to talking to customers, getting out there, trying to sell things, see if it actually works. And so that, for me, was the biggest difference, you know, going from just pure engineering and a little bit of product, you know, strategy to it's all about product strategy.
Michelle or G-Man, any lessons learned from making that transition?
For me, I was at Microsoft for 8.5 years, and you know, I remember the days when I joined in the 90s at Microsoft and the .com days, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, we used to stay up late at night, play Age of Empires on the Microsoft network in the product team, and I had a lot of fun. And fun for me is about, you know, personal and professional growth. And over 8.5 years, you know, when I joined Microsoft, it was somewhere a little over 15,000 employees. And by the time I left Microsoft, it was way over 100,000 employees. And I lost that sense of fun. And for me, the fun goes back to personal and professional growth. And I wasn't growing at the same rate I was when I started at Microsoft. So really, that was the time for me of trying to find like what is the place and what is the type of environment, and really reinventing myself and the place around me of hey, how am I going to continue to grow at that same rate or more than where I grew before? And that was just, I think, the perfect opportunity for me to leave and put that destiny in my own hands.
Yeah, good stories. I think my path is a little different. So I kind of spent 20 years in enterprise, but never at a company like Microsoft or Amazon, super big. I was at a enterprise software company called Mercury Interactive, from 200 people through 3,000. So that was my college education, I think. And then I ended up here. I joined Aptio as employee 17. So part of why I came to a startup that early, I ran product, is I wanted to see a company get built. I feel like that was my MBA. You know, I'd been in a big company, I'd been part of big product teams, but I wanted to see a company get built from the ground up. And so I think by the time I founded UserMind, I had enough experience both in seeing a company get built and in being part of winning cultures and like knowing how to hire A+ people that I just didn't think I could work for anybody anymore. So I think my career progression.
I often say that I'm unemployable.
Yeah, I think my story is a very logical set of steps. You know, it wasn't quite so dramatic as going from super big to startup. It was more working my way back from big to small.
And is there a cultural lesson you took out of those bigger organizations that you have applied to your own startups?
I think I look at it as you know, it's different. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't really compare Microsoft and the startup world. I know people try to compare it, and we get applicants to compare and say, well, you know, Microsoft has this. It's like, well, we're not Microsoft. You know, it's like, well, we have these, Microsoft doesn't have those. And if you're just comparing two different things, really the thing I challenge people with is, you know, when you life and like what makes a great employee, entrepreneur, or insert your word for someone that's working, is someone that has experience. And experience is a multitude of things, right? There is depth, obviously. You know, you heard a talk about machine learning, and like you need depth of experience versus if you're an entrepreneur, you're in a startup, you need breadth of experience. Mm-hmm. And going from Microsoft to a startup environment, you get to see a huge breadth, right? Like I had the fortunate of opportunity. You know, I'm from Hawaii. I've never even traveled outside the United States until I joined Microsoft. I had the privilege of speaking at many places in over 20 countries. By the time I finished my Microsoft career, spoke to Fortune 100 companies, had amazing process that was already put in place, and you get to see what resources are able to buy you and what a machine look like, right? And then when you look in the startup world, you get to, you know, you don't have those resources. You have more creativity. You have to have a lot more street smarts. But ultimately, what makes you successful is that experience that you've gone through a lot of hardship. You've gone through a diversity of things, and then what makes it easier is not the less amount of hardship you go through, but the experience helps you go through that easier, right? So the diversity, I think, helps to create a better athlete when I think about from a startup environment.
Yeah, great. So the inspiration for this panel and the title of it is Navigating the Cloud. And when we started noodling on this idea, the concept was, God, it's got to be a hard time to be a startup CEO in the cloud. I mean, just outside impression is, this is a world dominated by the biggest companies in the world, from Google to Microsoft to Amazon, many here in our backyard. Why in the world would you take this startup leap into that territory, and what's that like? And so I'd like to ask each of the panelists if that is a true assumption, and if so, why you are so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I mean, I look at it as, this is the difference with an entrepreneur mindset. Either it's a challenge or it's an opportunity. And I look at this thing as cloud is massive. Gartner predicts that there's going to be over 150,000 software houses in SaaS, in cloud by the end of 2020. So you think about that, right? Like, if cloud is that hard and there's so many giants, like, Gartner wouldn't be predicting that many. And you look at the direction of the cloud, people are going to buy best of breed. Suite organizations like a Microsoft is not going to be able to satisfy everything. Are they going to have a great payroll system? Are they going to have a great, benefit system and all those type of things? So it does create a lot of opportunity, and we're really going into this cloud era where what I consider is all these enterprise applications, all these platform services are now offered in a quicker model that's easier to manage, easier to deploy, easier on all aspects on the business. But it does pose different challenges, right? Technology comes in cycles. For every technology, there are always different challenges. You listen to, artificial intelligence, you listen to AI, you read about all these stories about saying, oh my God, you gotta watch out for AI, they might take over the human race. Those are all challenges. That, to me, as an entrepreneur, are our opportunities that we can seize and help not only improve the market, but also monetize on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the reality is exactly the opposite of what you painted. I mean, from my point of view, the cost of capital is going to zero, which means the barrier to entry to start a startup is going to essentially zero, which means that if you're on the side of like an Amazon, you're facing more competition than ever before. And by the way, the buyers have shifted from IT to the business, so more business buyers are writing checks than ever before. I think this is the time. There's no better time than now to create any cloud startup, particularly oriented toward the business. I'm completely with you. I think it's
Joe,
all
what are your
opportunity.
thoughts? Because you it seems that you could try to be a little bit of a Switzerland here and tie a lot of things together. So.
That's exactly right. So I think, for me, there are two major things, and Pullumi's a little bit different because we're trying to target developers, and I think the first thing is multi-cloud. Every organization we talk to these days is thinking about multi-cloud, whether that's just from having leverage in contract negotiation with Amazon or Google, or insulating yourself from the inevitability that you might have to move to a different cloud, or a SaaS company who architected their product to be 100% AWS and then realized, oh, I have to run on premises in a Kubernetes cluster because I'm selling to the government. There are a bunch of reasons to go multi-cloud, and although I think the major players will pay lip service to multi-cloud, you have to understand their businesses. It's not in their best interest to really do multi-cloud for real, and so we can leverage that as well. I think the second.
So at the end of the day, if you heard Mark Rusinovich earlier, there is going to be a big Azure button on that on GitHub.
I mean, selling Azure is the way that Microsoft is going to make a lot of money, and so that's going to motivate a lot of things. And I saw this from VS Code and .NET open source, and that is definitely a motivating factor. It's not the only motivating factor. I'm not saying it's going to be nefarious, but you have to understand their job is to make money. And so we can actually be a little bit more nimble as well. That's the second advantage. Microsoft has many, many people, but there's many more opportunities they can go pursue, whereas we can be a little bit more focused on a niche, make customers happy, and move faster in pursuing it.
And how did you find that niche, and how have you thought about that as you weigh potential competition from the bigger players?
I personally felt it. When I was at Microsoft, the last team I ran, giant engineering organization, I would say 75% of the time and energy was spent on existing products. And so it was very difficult to actually carve out what are those new things that we're going to go do. It sounds great. You've got an engineering team of 500 people or something, but if only 20% can really go pursue those new opportunities, you have to be very deliberate about that. And so in talking to customers, and it really has to pay off because those are very expensive resources. It's hard to turn that boat very quickly. And so when you commit to a path, it's got to be a multi-year path. I think in a startup, you can pivot a lot more quickly. You can try things out. You can talk to lots of customers. And so that was how we found the opportunity.
By the way, I'm super with you on multi-cloud. So to me, multi-cloud is just Unix, Linux, Windows all over again. I mean, IT, Java was invented to create abstraction, to enable, to liberate tech from these old school, hardware infrastructures. To me, the idea that there's going to be one monolithic AWS or Azure, no way. It's abstraction will emerge, Kubernetes, multi-cloud, containers, like that's where value moves. So to me, I feel like it's the same idea as just being repeated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How did you orchestrate or build the product at UserMind with that in mind, or did you?
Look, I'm obviously playing in a different space from these guys. We're selling to non-IT folks, so we're not really selling to technologists a tool to really address kind of the core efficiencies of cloud. We're selling a platform. Our main competition is that people would build some of the capabilities we have in-house. So I think it's funny, when I started Apptio, there was this whole controversy over like, is cloud secure enough? And it's funny, I've witnessed it from back then to now. I mean, the whole game has completely changed. Like the business wants to buy cloud, nobody wants to deal with upgrades. So at least from my point of view, the Amazon Azure thing, it's kind of irrelevant to our business model. We more deal with operating model. Our customers might be like, hey, we want a VPC, or hey, we want an on-prem instance. But like no one's really going to be pushing us to be multi-cloud in our architecture. People are not mature enough today in that sense to push cloud vendors. For their own IT organizations, to me, it's a core question that they should answer.
And multi-cloud is actually very difficult. That was one of the opportunities that we see. Is, there aren't a lot of solutions out there to really architect in a multi-cloud manner from day one. Yeah. Kubernetes emerging, that's definitely helping, but we're just at the very beginning.
Yeah.
G-Man, how do you think about that? Because my read is that you did start more on with Azure and tied into their back end. So how are you thinking about multi-cloud at BitTitan?
Yeah, I think there's a multitude of things. You've asked a bunch of questions. When I think about, and this all ties together, the first thing is, like, how do we compete with these large organizations? Because this ties into multi-cloud. And I don't look at it as competition because there's two aspects. Number one is when you create a business, it's about value and differentiation, right? Like every business has to have that. The second thing is that when you think about cloud, it is about multi-cloud. It is about best of breed. It is about interoperability, right? That's why, when you heard, the previous speakers talking about it and talking about GitHub, you talk about, the Azure function apps, Azure automation, Azure logic apps, actually Azure logic apps, et cetera, right? They have to have an open stack. No one is going to adopt it in a closed system type of way anymore. That is just a very old thinking. And this is the beauty of cloud. This is what enables best of breed. So back to your last question about multi-cloud and where is the world of multi-cloud. That is where the world's going to be, because there isn't going to be a single organization that's going to solve anything. And you think about these requests, how do you pull requests? Do you actually have event-driven requests and how that works? All these systems have to tie together.
So you don't think there could be a place for a fourth player maybe to emerge that is the dominant player in multi-cloud, or maybe that's Joe's company. But is there room for that, or is it going to be a bunch of pieces?
Multi-cloud, I think there is a room for a new category that I think is underlooked. And the new category is what I would consider cloud enablement. Cloud enablement is a huge category, and again, it goes back to, just like what he was saying and what we're doing here, is that we're here to help tie all these pieces together, because cloud is so fragmented. The average organization over the next 3 years is going to be adopting hundreds of SaaS applications if they're not already today. I know at BitTitan, for example, we have literally 2, if not 300 SaaS applications that we use as line of business apps throughout our organization. And the biggest challenges that we have, in addition to every other organization facing the multi-cloud problem, is how do you manage these systems? How do you integrate them? How do you tie them together? How do you create workflow? How do you go about having that in a cohesive system? Because previously, I used to be a Microsoft shop. I used to be a Linux shop. I used to be a X shop. Insert your favorite brand there. And today's world, everyone's moving to becoming a cloud shop, and what that means is multi-cloud.
And I think SaaS is the big key piece here.
Yeah.
Arguably, is Salesforce multi-cloud? Is Zapier multi-cloud? Is IFT multi-cloud? Arguably, they kind of are multi-cloud in the sense that you're paying for services that are built atop this amazing pyramid of cloud infrastructure that Amazon, Google, Microsoft are providing. And you have to, at the end of the day, how is Amazon making money? It's by selling compute and storage. And if they're at the bottom of the funnel and there's all this value being created on top of it, everybody wins, the people creating the value and Amazon. And so, it's really, you have to think of it in that way, how are people making their money and where's the value actually coming from?
Yeah.
And I think SaaS is the key thing. It really is that fourth player, if you will.
Interesting. Great. Michelle, any thoughts on that since you're in the SaaS space?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, G-Man already nailed it, which is, to me, there's the cloud as a new platform to build homegrown apps, and then there's the implications of SaaS on the entire business model of a company. And, the entire premise of UserMind is that pretty much every function in a company is going to get reinvented and move to a heterogeneous SaaS stack. So marketing is going to have 50 systems, and sales is going to have 50 systems, and there isn't really an ERP backbone anymore. So how do you connect all that together? So, I think whether it's multi-cloud management, multi-cloud deployment, or it's SaaS application management, we're just hitting the next frontier where a whole set of new categories are going to get created around managing the reality. And the reality is now it's almost all in cloud, where it's 60 or 70% in cloud. It's going to be homegrown in cloud, and it's going to be off-the-shelf bought at SaaS. So what are all the new management technologies? What are all the new missing categories? And kind of that's the world we're all selling into and living into. So I think it's fun times.
I think one of the things that we haven't talked about is the mindset of the organization, right? We talked a lot about what we're doing to enable them, but let's talk a little bit about the mindset of these organizations, right? A lot of these applications are, the decision is being made by the front office, no longer the back office, right? Because it's faster. They want quicker results. They want it more time so that they can actually go and see and overcome their challenges. The other thing is that, right, they want to go and save costs. So when you think about the capital expenditure, you don't want to amortize all these things over years. You really want these things at a monthly subscription. It's a lower cost, and I can leverage my cash because cash is king as a part of these organizations, right? Again, the CFO now is downsizing IT organizations. We work with some Fortune 100 companies, and I talk to them, I'm like, how big is your organization? We have 3 people. I'm the CTO, and I got 2 people that report to me, right? And they're really downsizing these. This is the mindset of who the buyer is. So how do we, as a technology landscape, as technology organizations, keep up with these customers? Because those are the needs that's driving us to what we do today.
Yeah, no, I strongly agree with that. I mean, I think it's interesting on the app side. We're seeing the IT folks have to develop new skills, and the 2 important new skills they're having to grow is integration and configuration. Because increasingly, IT isn't building an app from scratch. IT is taking Salesforce and Marketo and Zora and 3 other homegrown apps and trying to connect them together to make lead to cash work better. And so when you think about it, the role of IT is changing, the skills they need are changing. Actually the org structure is going to fundamentally change. We're seeing new teams emerge where marketing and some of IT are being brought together into customer experience teams. So I think there are huge mindset and organizational implications to this shift that all the fallout hasn't occurred of what are the new roles and how does it really look like in the new world order.
So building off that thought, G-Man, just in terms of where companies are and your customers are in this transition to the cloud, where do you score it by whatever sports metric you want to use to score it? What inning, what quarter, where is it at for most organizations in terms of their adoption of the cloud and their transition? It's sounding like it's starting, based on what you're saying, the front office, it's starting to be driven pretty aggressively versus if we had this conversation 3-5 years ago, it might have been a different story.
It is, and I've been in. You have to understand, I've been in cloud for 20 years. I was actually offered a job at Microsoft in their first cloud division. It was codenamed NetDocs back in the 90s. And when you look at cloud, and you look at a lot of it is timing. And when you think about timing, what has to align in order for cloud adoption to work? Number one is you have a cultural shift. Before it used to be, this I always taught to customers anecdotal story, which is it used to be cool to have servers. And nowadays it's like, how many servers do you have? The less servers you have, the more cool you are as an organization. So there is a cultural shift, a mindset shift as a part of that. Then the other thing you have to look at is the readiness of applications. Because when you think about cloud, cloud's been along for many years. It's so funny. I was at a conference a couple years, just literally within the last 6 months, and someone asked me, it's like, this cloud thing, what is this cloud thing? And I defined cloud, I said, it was a great marketing person, right? Because really what cloud is today is really the adoption of this serverless type of environments for businesses. That's really what we've coined cloud to be, right?
Benioff.
Of what it is today. So now when you think about cloud as a term and you think about adoption, it's not only the mindset, but the readiness of these business applications. So when you go and reverse back 10 years ago, what applications were available and ready? You think about email was there, and then you've got early stages of file storage. That was it in 2007 when I started BitTitan, right? You fast forward today, you've got CRMs way over there, you've got customer success, you've got marketing tools, you've got so many things. You got payroll systems. You've got HR benefits type of systems. All these packages like Namely and Gusto and things like that. Like the maturity level of these applications and the technology and the availability now is like greater than has been ever in the last 10 years. And again, going back to the statement I made earlier and what Gartner said, right, by 2020, 150,000 software houses. So you can imagine the amount of software applications that will be available to the average business at a cost that is a fraction of what people do today at the capital expenditure, and the speediness of the deployment is just amazing.
Yeah. One of the things I think is interesting about SaaS particularly and its adoption is, in my life and 25 years of enterprise, usually you see technology companies and financial services are your earliest adopters of cutting edge tech. And my observation has been that it's the laggard industries that are the cutting edge adopters of SaaS. And they do it because it's the only way to level the playing field. So what I find fascinating is how, to some extent, SaaS is completely inverted the entire go-to-market of most enterprise companies and completely changed the vertical adoption strategy. And so if you look at kind of people who still build, they're people who have very high profit margins, they're in very high value-oriented businesses. That's a pretty small number of verticals. And the people who are aggressive cloud adopters are people in commodity businesses where they can't afford to build all these applications or technologies from scratch. So I don't know what all the implications of that business model inversion is, but I think if you look at now who are the thought leaders, it isn't actually the typical people who've been thought leaders in technology over the last 20 years.
Well, just do a plug for our CIO panel right after lunch with Providence Health and Alaska Airlines. The CIOs of those two organizations are going to be here, so that's going to be a great discussion. I know they're going to dig into that some more and talk about where they are on that journey. But Joe, any thoughts on where we're at in terms of just customer adoption of cloud services, if you were to put a score on it?
Yeah, I think we're still very early, and it's hard to answer because I view it as just an infinite evolution of how software is built. It's a journey. It's going to take a long time. I would say, when we talk to organizations, there's usually sort of the 10% of the IT organization that is out in front, that's trying the new technologies, that's using containers and serverless, and they're really trying to modernize the technology stack. But the reality is, and this is where you hear a lot of the momentum around Kubernetes is sort of actually within that leading 10%. And then you have the rest of the organization, and my perception from talking to CIOs and people in those organizations is they really are struggling to keep up with the evolution, especially from an organizational standpoint, because it changes everything about how you deliver software. You're not building J2EE applications anymore and standing them up and managing them in your own data center. And 5 years ago, you would have been transitioning that to maybe using VMs in the cloud, but it turns out, no, that's probably not the right thing to do. Instead, it's to go pay a SaaS company because they're going to do it better than you. And so people are still struggling to catch up, and there's still sort of the developer versus DevOps sort of dichotomy, which also is sort of lagging, and a lot of people are struggling to make that transition too. So I think we're super early, and I think, again, it's an infinite journey. It's not like we're going to be done in 5 years.
If I were to go back to your original question, because I know none of us actually answered your question that you asked, I would basically say we're in the second quarter. Right? That's basically where cloud is today, right? In baseball terms, I would basically say we were probably in the second or third inning of where cloud is today. I think that is really the opportunity we have in front of us.
Yeah.
Great. So I know this topic is around navigating the path for startups, so I want to flip it a little bit. Which company of the tech titans out there do you think has the greatest opportunity in front of them? Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and since we talked about SaaS a lot, I'll throw Salesforce into the mix as well. Which has the greatest opportunity to become an even bigger player in your view right now based on what you know in 2018?
So I can tell you what I think of the opportunity, and I'll tell you who I think will actually succeed. I think Google has an amazing opportunity. They built Google. They understand how to run things at Google scale. They have Diane Green. They've got a huge opportunity. They got the best tech. They created Kubernetes. I think they've got a giant opportunity in front of them. I think culturally, Google sort of struggles to sort of execute on that opportunity, but they've got Diane at the helm, so we'll see what happens.
Do you think they can make the transition from what is typically thought of as more of a consumer-based company and into the enterprise?
They have the DNA. I think bringing Diane in gives them the enterprise DNA, and now it's all up to that. You know, it's execution time. I think Microsoft has that extreme enterprise DNA. They have the ability to bundle, right? They can go into an account that they've had for the last 20 years and say, hey, I'm going to sell you more Office 365 alongside that Azure subscription. And that was the trick to, you know, MSDN
have
subscriptions.
G-Man's company help out along the way.
That's right. And they had MSDN and Visual Studio and all these things in the past, and they have the best developer tools, and so they have a lot to offer. They can bundle lots of interesting things, Skype for Business, et cetera.
But,
so
but it sounds like Google is where I think there's the biggest opportunity.
The biggest opportunity, but I think Microsoft is doing really well here.
Michelle, what do you think?
I mean, you know, I think they're all really different companies. If I had to bet on one in enterprise, I'd bet on Microsoft. So, you know, from my point of view, these are two distinct markets. Azure, Amazon, Google Cloud, and there's the SaaS market of enterprise applications. There's only one player that does both in the list of 4 that you described, and that has a channel to the enterprise. So from my point of view, Amazon wins SMB mid-market in kind of platform development. Microsoft wins the enterprise by combining, you know, GitHub and PaaS and apps driven by data. Salesforce reinvents modern ERP. You know, I mean, they certainly are like the leading application vendor in the world. And I think, you know, Google's the one that's kind of stranded, my point of view. I mean, they don't have a channel to the enterprise. Sales is really hard to do. You know, Diane's a genius on the product strategy front, but she doesn't, you know shit about selling from my point of view. So, you know, I actually don't think, I think Google's least well positioned. They're going to pivot into other businesses because they're going to have to. So I guess if I had to choose one, I'd say Microsoft is kicking everyone's ass.
Yep.
Good. G-Man.
You know, when I think about winners and losers, I think about 3 core areas, right? Technology, athletes, and mindset. Right, this is to me the key factor to making success when I think about SaaS organizations. They all have different strengths and weaknesses as a part of that. I think Google has a great platform story. I think they have great technology. I think they're lacking in the athletes. I think they're lacking in the mindset department of that. I think they could be a competitor in that platform as a service space. I think Microsoft has great technology, traditionally a platform type of organization. Literally, I was talking to an ex-colleague of mine at Microsoft. I said, if Microsoft just takes the entire Windows stack and turns every single one of those things into microservices, they could literally win the entire platform, the serverless compute space, right? But what do they lack? They lack the mindset and they lack the athletes. You think about customer success, they don't have any customer success departments, right? Like that is a core functionality of SaaS applications. I'm glad that you actually brought on Salesforce because I actually think Salesforce, believe it or not, I believe that actually has all 3 of those components. You think about it, they're actually a SaaS application. They have an amazing platform. You know, they don't have that infrastructure level, but again, like they're not competing at that level. They have the mindset because they are already a SaaS organization, customer success. Like they have a lot of key factors of success. You also look at where the cloud maturity is today and what people are adopting, right? Email, documents, HR, payroll, all these things are low-hanging fruit. They could absolutely seize that market today around customer success, sales, and marketing. Yeah. The core 3 functionalities of every organization in the world, that's the possibility they have. So if I were to bet, I think Salesforce, if they were to invest, do a lot more M&As, accelerate their platform in that SaaS world, I think they could be the winner.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't often ask a question on a panel, and you got 3 really different viewpoints. So Salesforce, Microsoft, Google, very cool. Yeah. Well, I know we're going to turn it over to questions, and I do want people to step up. So if you have a question, just come on up to the mic. While we're doing that, and we're queuing that line, I do want to ask a quick question just about Seattle. We're hosting this event here in Seattle. It's been given the moniker Cloud City. What do you think of that moniker?
I love it.
Yeah?
I think, you know, honestly, building a developer tools company, we have the most amazing talent available to us here in Seattle. You know, I don't know how, but we've managed to convince folks to leave Google, leave Microsoft, leave Amazon to come join us. And that DNA, that talent pool is just, you wouldn't find that anywhere else, even in the Valley. And it's often very cloudy, so I think it's very apt.
Good.
I was going to say the exact same thing. You just stole around, man. Like, it's very fitting for a very cloudy city. But again, I go back to the premise that I spoke about, right? Like, what is cloud? Like, this is the evolution of the internet. We're talking about business class applications. When you think about organizations that have really the founding fathers of business applications, you have them right here in Seattle. So if, again, I go back to this, like, what is cloud? If I take all your traditional enterprise applications, business applications, and I cloudify them, right? Like, I've got myself an amazing business right there, right? I would basically, not to coin, I mean, I'm Seattle, so to coin these Silicon Valley guys like the social city. This is like the cloud city. You got enterprise grade people. You've got people that worked on those applications, the platforms. This is the winner. Don't go anywhere.
Great. Michelle, any thoughts on that?
Look, I largely agree. I think, I could have started my company in the Bay, and I chose to start it here. We obviously have a huge depth of developer talent. We just need more business founders. From my point of view, we need more business founders, and we need more money. The reason the Valley has more companies is not the depth of dev talent. I would agree that we rival pretty much any city in the world. We just need more people willing to be CEOs, and we need more capital to flow into the region. I like to say that there's nurse trees. It was HP and Silicon Graphics. Our nurse trees are Amazon and Microsoft. So if there's going to be a second Valley, it's us. What we call it, I don't know. I don't really care. Is it Cloud City, or is it Silicon Sound, or it doesn't matter. It mostly matters that a second Silicon Valley emerge, because once there are two, there can be 100. And until there's a second, everyone thinks there's only one. So.
Yeah. Well, great perspective. And I do want to take some questions, so make sure you get up, ask a question. You have some great minds up here. But Michelle and Joe, you both touched on, and come on up. You both touched on two topics I do want to hit on, hiring and capital, which I think are critical. So in a recent Robert Half study that I just got this week, it cited cloud computing is the most in-demand skill in Seattle. And I like database administrator. I think the unemployment rate in the survey was like 0.1% unemployment rate there. So before we jump to those two questions, how do you compete for hiring talent, or for talent in a market that is, there's some big paychecks going around by Oracle and Facebook and Google and Amazon? So, Jimon, you touched on this a little bit earlier, that you got to sell kind of a different story. Maybe Joe or Michelle, maybe tell a little bit about how you compete for talent.
The thing you don't do is you don't try to compete on price, because you're not going to win. You compete on vision. You find the people who might have moved here to go to Amazon or Microsoft and are realizing, hey, I actually want some fun again, sort of the story Gaiman told, where, I want to go build something. I want to build something innovative and new and fresh, and I want to come into work every day and find meaning in what I'm doing.
Yep.
And so you can really appeal to that. And yeah, there's a lot of demand, but, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Google, they're all paying for the relocation costs for a bunch of great talent that then is available to us as startup founders.
So Michelle, I took something off your website in a letter that you wrote. You said, building a passionate culture and beloved products lays the foundation for an enduring and successful company. What's been the hardest thing for you as CEO in achieving those factors?
Oh my God. I've made every mistake in the world.
Never put anything on your website. That's.
Look, I think, in hiring, so I'm not a technical founder, so I'm a product level founder. So, I think you have to build a great team of people who are better than you at every function. And I would say UserMind's there. Like, I love my staff. I feel like every one of my heads is way better than me at everything that they do. My head of sales is better than me at managing a pipeline and closing deals. So you hire the right people, and then second thing to me is like form an awesome team. And one of the biggest mistakes I made, and I've publicly written about it, is scaling before I had a little thing working. So you hire your first 3 devs, your first 4 devs, or whatever it is that you're doing. Don't scale until engineering's working. Don't scale until the process for delivery is working. Don't scale until the team dynamics are working. Don't scale until the basics of the product are working. Because once you have a working functional culture, functional product, and delivery process, you have something to build on. And so probably greatest mistake I made was scaling something, thinking that if I added the solution to something not working was adding more resources. And that's taken me quite a while to kind of fix all that. I'd say today we're past all of those internal issues, but that was probably the biggest single mistake I made.
Let's go to audience question. Thank you.
You talked about the buying power shifting from the back office to the front office and constantly being moved towards a business unit function. How do you take something that was once a very technical sales process to move towards a less technical audience?
Yeah, I mean, so all I do is sell to the business, and it's solution-based selling, right? So, you know, when we go sell UserMind, we don't talk about our technology. It's kind of funny. And when I first started the company, we did, and people were like, you know, this is not interesting. Like, the COO doesn't care about how I built the technology. You know, when we go talk to the COO now, we basically say, what are your business issues? Do you have an acquisition issue? Do you have a churn issue? Do you have, you know, some kind of a lifetime value issue? Do you have an OpEx problem? And we take their problems and work back to how our technology solves them. And so I think, you know, when you sell on the business side, you have to pick really two choices. You're either a platform company that's selling solutions, value-based sales, or you build a very narrow app where it's super obvious and can be bought at a very low friction, and you have a land and expand strategy. And you kind of got to commit to one or the other. So the app companies that are best at penetrating the enterprise, as an example, you know, Dropbox, nobody approves that deal. People just go out and do that deal because it's so intuitive and so simple, and then it spreads like wildfire. Zendesk, by the way, it's either bottoms up, great product led, or it's tops down. Workday, UserMind, you do value-based selling at the highest level in the organization, and you're selling a platform and the value it would deliver. Those are the only two models I've seen.
Do you choose that path before you start, or you figure it out in the midst? What did you do at UserMind?
I mean, I think you have to decide what you want to be and commit to one or the other. I got mine wrong, so I thought we were going to be, I was hoping to build a Zendesk, and turns out when we launched the company, our idea is basically one that enterprises need most. So we turned into an enterprise go-to-market with a complicated value-based sale. But don't do what I did. Get your hypothesis right. Try to be one or the other.
I would add and say, this is the classic dilemma of why startups fail. Because they provide zero value. They provide a bunch of features, functionality, and a technology stack that doesn't actually solve a real problem. And I'll give you a little story, right? When I started BitTitan, you know, I basically had a technology problem personally, right? And it was really, you know, I've amassed gigabytes of data at that time. Now I have like over a petabyte of just personal data alone. And one of the things I was paranoid about was, you know, losing that data in addition to accessibility to that data anywhere I was in the world. Right? And I created a technology, and I was like, oh my God, like, hey, check out this. You can store your files for free in the cloud as a part of that. That was my pitch as a part of that, but I'm pitching technology, right? And fast forward to today, how I look at businesses, it is really around value, right? What problems are you solving? Why would someone buy something? Like, you don't go to the store and be like, go to Best Buy or even the grocery store and be like, you know what? I just gonna grab 5 random things and like, I'm out of here. It's like, I'm cooking something very specific. I have a need for a very specific flavor, and I'm going to buy these things that's going to go and really, you know, inhibit my palate as a part of that, right? That's really how you go and build it. And when you think of answering your question, like which came first, value, absolutely. Again, I go back to this, like a lot of people do technology. You know, I was on a call yesterday with another entrepreneur, and he asked me, he's like, hey, I got this technology doing this. I said, what problem are you solving? That was the #1 question I asked him, and he didn't have a problem that he's solving. He was just building cool technology. I was like, take a page off my book here. I spent 4 years building technology, and I went nowhere. I changed my company to a value-based organization, and then we grew.
Yeah.
That's great.
So we've been talking about the proliferation of SaaS, where anything that's in IT today or developed in-house or runs on a pizza box in a data center is going to the cloud. So we have this huge proliferation of SaaS vendors, right? And yet each cloud platform is now offering a massive portfolio, right? Salesforce does machine learning, Google does hiring, Microsoft sells Kubernetes.
Yeah.
These new buyers, these front office buyers, are we going to see a convergence toward a handful of vendors that are essentially channels with massive portfolios? Or will we continue to have these small vendors where each one is doing its own sales?
You're going to get a combination of both. Right, I mean, you know, again, you look at the mindset of the buyer. Like, you know, even me as the CEO of the company, you know, I have my VP of finance here, and I don't want to write 1,000 checks every single month, right? And then not only that, but if it's on a credit card, I have to reconcile that back to my books and things like that. Like, organizations are gonna weigh the pros and cons, right? If I go and buy Salesforce, do I buy their knowledge system? Do I buy their marketing? Do I buy Pardot? Do I buy all these various things? Or do I buy someone that only focuses on that, and you're gonna evaluate a multitude of things, right? Not only is like, where is the maturity of their organization? And by the way, we're going through this right now, and I'll give you an anecdotal story here. We're looking at revamping where our knowledge base is. And I've got Salesforce, we use Salesforce, and Salesforce has a knowledge system, and they're like, okay, you've got this, and then I've got dedicated organizations, and then I've got a timing and a need, right? Like, this is what I tell everyone. In the next 60 days, I'm opening my wallet and I'm buying something. The question comes down to that you fundamentally have to ask is, during that timing that I'm buying, what are my needs? What is the value? What are the problems that I need to solve? And you have to make a business decision at that time, right? Obviously these guys are gonna sell me and say, hey, you know what, we're gonna be there. And I ask them when. I can't tell you, but we're gonna be there. I can't bet my business on the future. I have real problems that have to be solved today. Now the thing to think about is not who to bet on, but really how open is your stack, right? The beauty of cloud is the ability to make your data liquid. So now when you think about evaluating all these SaaS applications, how do I get my data out? Would I be able to go and migrate that to a different system? Would I be able to adopt that? That's really where the benefit of SaaS comes along, is that my data isn't held hostage anymore.
And I think also, as a startup founder, it is something I think about a lot personally, and I know a lot of startup founders, you have to sort of war game it and just really understand where are the financial incentives for these companies to go and innovate in these areas? And in many cases, it's just not there. It's actually more in their best interest to partner with the startup than it is to go and starve out the ecosystem. It's in Amazon's best interest to have a healthy, vibrant ecosystem of startups that are building on top of their platform. They don't want to go and compete with every one of them. And that, I was very involved in the open source transition for Microsoft, and that was the thing that we talked about a lot was, if we go out there and we've got a product, we're going to starve innovation on top of the Microsoft platform, and you don't want to do that. And so if you you sort of have to get in the heads of the people making these decisions at these companies to really understand, okay, what are the openings, what are the opportunities, and what's most likely going to happen. The problem is, somebody once said, being a startup playing in the space is sort of being like a cockroach at an elephant ballroom dance. Like if the big company decides to turn left and you're the cockroach, like you might get squished. But if you really think through what are the incentives, I think you can avoid some of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're asking to me what's a classic question, like this idea that there are times in the world when platforms are favored and there are times in the world when best of breed is favored. And the pendulum tends to swing back and forth with the bias being that it's mostly in the middle. I think we're a little in the tending to favor heterogeneity. I think platforms are inherently at a disadvantage. And to me, the question of like, where does a platform win? Where does best of breed win? It's a complicated one, but I would say in a mature business, no one's not going to buy Salesforce for CRM. Maybe they're going to buy Dynamics, but most likely they're going to buy Salesforce. To me, that market is settled and pretty solved. And so, the question to me is like, if I was looking at, how many, the reason why we're tending toward heterogeneity right now is there's so much channel innovation, there's so much digital innovation, there's so much transformation that's taking place in the app stack. There's so much things to be cloudified that like the fact that CRM is settled just means that doesn't matter. It means that the market is still more leaning toward best of breed and heterogeneity, at least in my opinion. And that's because cost of capital is zero. That's because the buying centers have shifted. That's because the number of people who buy tech has exploded. So that's kind of my Uber point of view. But if you're founding, I think the question becomes, to Jimin's point, like, and kind of a combination of these, which is like, does the buyer, are they going to buy where they're avoiding risk? They're going to buy CRM, they're going to buy Salesforce, or is there some disruption happening to CRM so profound where you as a startup have an opportunity? And I, by the way, personally think that like the reason why Microsoft bought LinkedIn is that data-driven CRM is going to reinvent CRM. That fundamentally, most of these application platforms are going to get disrupted 15 years out. Anyway, that was kind of a long answer to a straightforward question, but to me it's like, halfway between the middle and heterogeneity right now. Good time to found.
Yeah, I think we can squeeze in the last question, yeah.
Hey, every cloud has their own strength, from the biggest one to the smallest or the niche ones, but these multiple cloud offering has created an enterprise new trend or new problem, that is how to manage from an enterprise perspective this multi-cloud strategy. Because what we have seen into the enterprises is that they have to manage the big ones, the niche ones, the specific ones. So how they should manage this multi-cloud strategy?
Yeah, I sort of compartmentalize. The cloud is such a big thing, and like, you know, Amazon, you know, these AI services that all the cloud providers are offering, is that cloud? Is that SaaS? What is it? And really, if you look at things like containers and serverless and some of these trends, it is, despite, you know, cloud providers don't want to say this, but it really is forcing agreement and commoditization of the compute layer across all these cloud providers. So the most exciting thing for me about Kubernetes, for example, is that we all now agree what it means to run a container on one of these clouds. I think it will continue going in that direction, and then it will be all about what are the value-add services you use on top. So, hey, maybe we use AI from Google because they've got the best AI platform, but maybe we use the data storage platform from Amazon because we want to use Redshift and combining these together. And so you sort of have to think about the problem in layers before you can really understand how to go and attack the problem.
Yeah, you know, for me, there are 3 key factors to success in anything we do: people, process, and systems. So if I go and look at kind of an IT department, right, like these are the 3 things that I keep in mind that I talk to my customers about. From a people perspective, what type of athletes do you have? Traditionally, they're very deep. I have a deep on this one piece of technology. With cloud, you just can't go deep in that anymore. You have to really have a breadth, because again, going back to over 150,000 software houses, you gotta know what's out in the market, where they're gonna be, where these people are positioning, and where the winners and losers are gonna be, et cetera. The second thing is around process, right? What is my governance process around adopting technology? Because again, you have, again, one of the things I said earlier was, how do these interoperate between each other? If I had a HR system and a payroll system, they've got to talk to each other. You don't want to go in and say, hey, I'm going to add 5 employees here, add 5 employees there, I'm going to update your pay here, I'm going to update your pay here. Like, what is that integration strategy? So you've got to have governance around all these different applications. And then from a systems perspective, now that I've gotten all these SaaS applications, how do I go about managing, again, going back to the life cycle of IT, right? How do I assess them? How do I manage them? How do I deploy them? And what is that technology from a management perspective that's going to automate and manage those things on a frequently basis in my organization every single day?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I go back to Joe's comment. You got to break cloud into 2 pieces. There's PaaS, any kind of, you know, platform technology from server to database to machine learning. This is not a new problem. The reason why multi-cloud has to exist is vendor lock-in. It's cost. So no enterprise is going to put all their stuff in just AWS because AWS is going to screw them price-wise. So to me, if I'm an enterprise, multi-cloud infrastructure, multi-cloud management software, all that has to emerge because it's the only way that I can actually move to the cloud, take the opportunity, take all the benefits of the cloud, and not basically repeat all my patterns of the past with that, going back to like Linux with, you know, vendor lock-in and apps on Linux. So I think IT is actually much better prepared to face all the implications of the PaaS environment. I think this impact of like, you're taking non-technologists and they're buying a ton of technology and we need to integrate it together because it actually meets the business objectives. I personally see the business struggling much more on that side because we don't have an organizational muscle. You know, like, is there a business technology team? Should it report to the COO? What's the governance around buying SaaS? What's our integration strategy? No one's talked here about config management in SaaS. When you buy Salesforce, you hard code all your config into Salesforce. Like, why? That's your business logic. So I personally think the management problems on the SaaS side are very interesting because they've never been faced before, and they're being faced by a bunch of people who don't have a technology background. So anyway, my 2 cents is like multi-cloud to me is obvious, going to play out in a very obvious way. Traditional buyers, traditional vertical adoption, very classic IT evolution of technology. Implications of how SaaS transforms in the way it's managed in the business, this I think we haven't faced before.
Well, this was great. Thank you so much to our panelists. G-Man, Michelle, Joe, thank you very much. Let's hear it for our panelists today.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. So we're about ready to break for lunch.